All right, tonight we're stepping into a world where healing is guesswork. Your patients are mostly livestock adjacent, and your treatments may or may not involve beetles boiling moss and something called thrice blessed pig grease. That's right, we're wandering into the life of a medieval village healer. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this with your sanity reputation or socks intact. Before we begin, be a dear and subscribe to the channel now, before you fall asleep and forget, or worse, before your neighbor accuses you of witchcraft for enjoying educational content after dark. It's happened. Also, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Because if you're listening to this while lying under a blanket with a fever and a suspicious rash, well, you'll relate to this episode a little too much. Now, go ahead and kill the overhead light. Maybe throw a blanket over your shoulders, or crack the window just a bit to let in that perfectly spooky breeze. It's story time, healer. You wake before the sun, not out of ambition, but because someone's already banging on your warped wooden door, shouting something about oozing boils. Again, your hut is cold, always cold. It smells like damp straw smoke, and whatever you were steeping in the cauldron last night, possibly marigold tea, possibly something for worms. You squint at the fire pit, which has gone out. Again. You shuffle to the door. Your back cracks like old bread. Outside, a wiry farmer stands barefoot in the mud, clutching a child wrapped in a cloak that smells faintly of cow. She's coughing, he says, and hot. So are you, but you don't mention it. You usher them inside and begin the first ritual of your day triage with almost no information, 0 tools, and whatever's in your pocket. You touch the girl's forehead. Warm. You look at her tongue. Pale. You ask how long she's been coughing. Since Candlemas, the farmer says. That was 3 weeks ago. You sigh and reach for your pouch of dried thyme and a bit of horehound. Boil them in water. Add honey if you have it. You don't. You give the brew to the child and tell the farmer to keep her warm and off the dung pile for at least a few days. He nods solemnly. You know he'll do none of those things. Mainstream historical fact, medieval healers, especially in villages, weren't formally trained. They learned through experience, superstition, and the occasional whispered tip from someone's aunt. They were herbalists, midwives, ex-nuns, retired knights with a limp, or just the only literate person in town. Fringe tidbit. Some believed healing power came from the 7th son of a 7th son. You've met 3 such sons. One sneezed constantly. The other 2 were allergic to sunlight. You usher the farmer out, collect your payment. 2 onions and a carved button and sit back down by the fire. You add the button to your growing collection. It's not worth anything, but it's shiny. And that's nice. Your second patient of the day is a pig, not metaphorically, a real pig, limping. The blacksmith insists it's been hexed. You examine the leg, probably just stepped in something sharp. You smear a paste of mashed garlic and old wine over the joint and tie it with wool. The blacksmith frowns. That's it? You nod. Tell it encouraging things. He grunts and carries the pig out like a sack of potatoes. Your hut smells like garlic and regret. Historians still argue whether medieval village healers were respected or feared. The truth. A bit of both. When you cured someone, you were a godsend. When someone died, well, they started checking your floorboards for runes. You finally sit to eat your own breakfast thin porridge and half a turnip. The other half is in your ointment jar. Don't ask. As you eat, you go over your schedule for the day. 1 birth, 2 cases of cursed feet, and a follow-up visit to the baker's wife, who claims she's been possessed by sadness since last harvest. You rub your temples. It's not even noon, but you'll go. Because they need you. Because you're the healer. And there's no one else. You step outside and immediately regret it. The mud sucks at your boots, like it's hoping to absorb you entirely, and the air smells like turnips left in sin. A chicken runs by squawking indignantly. Somewhere in the distance, someone's yelling about the healer stealing my milk again, which honestly isn't even your crime this week. You trudge to your little garden patch behind the hut, or rather, what's left of it, after goats mistook it for an appetizer tray. You check the withered stalks, wormwood, some sage, a limp fennel plant that's seen better centuries. Everything is filthy. The water barrel has a dead fly in it again. Your mortar and pestle are stained with something, possibly beet juice, possibly blood. You wipe them on your apron, which is also stained and smells like 5-day-old time tea and panic. Mainstream, fact medieval hygiene standards were by our measures non-existent. People rarely bathed. Latrines were communal and horrifying, and most surgeries were performed on wooden tables next to open windows or livestock. Healers worked in these same conditions, often with bare hands and no notion of sterilization. You return inside, where your clinic is also your kitchen, your bedroom, and depending on how much snow has drifted in your swamp, the straw bedding in the corner has taken on a new ecosystem, and the cat has given up and moved into the chimney. Your next patient arrives just after sunrise, the Reeves nephew, limping and dramatically moaning. You suspect he's faking it to skip pig duty, but his mother insists he's cursed. You check the leg. No bruising, no swelling, just an uncanny ability to act like he's dying whenever someone says the word chores. You sigh. You mix him a tincture of nettle honey and a generous dash of harmless herbs that taste very bitter. He makes a face, gags, and says he feels healed. Miraculous. As they leave, the mother slips you a small wedge of cheese and says, "You're a gift, truly." The cheese smells slightly like feet. But hey, calcium is calcium. Fringe, tidbit. Some healers used smell therapy, waving pungent herbs or pastes under a patient's nose to drive out the ill humors. Whether it worked or just distracted people from their current misery is still up for debate. You wipe down your work table with an old tunic. You don't know whose it was. It's yours now. Everything that enters your hut eventually becomes cloth, fuel, or bandage. Outside the village buzzes with activity. A dog chases a child, a cartwheel breaks, someone screams about stolen bread. Just another Wednesday. You step outside again, drawn toward the commotion, only to find the baker himself waving a lump of dough and yelling, "She says the bread's cursed." You follow him back to the bakery, where his wife clutches her head and mutters about dark spirits in the flour. You sigh. Again. You gently coax her into sitting down, place a calming hand on her shoulder, and brew a tea of chamomile and rose petals. She drinks it. Her breathing slows. You suggest she sleep in a different room for a few nights, away from the oven. The baker nods. "You're wise," he says. You nod back carefully, avoiding the burning bread in his hearth. Historians still argue whether healers leaned more on spiritual explanations or herbal ones. Truth is, you use whatever works potions for the skeptics, prayers for the pious stern, looks for the lazy. Back in your hut, the cat has returned. You name him Plague Bait. He judges your existence silently from atop the herb shelf. You open your supply chest well box and take inventory. 3 garlic cloves, 1 dried lizard tail for luck, half a root of ginger, and a bundle of stinging nettle. You toss the tail onto the shelf, refill your tea jar, and check the floorboards for any strange puddles. Just the usual. You step around them. Your last patient of the morning is a shepherd with weeping toes. You don't ask. You don't want to know. You apply crushed mint and bind them in wool. He nods in gratitude and offers you a handful of acorns. You don't even flinch anymore. You're not just a healer. You're a filter for the village's filth, worry, and deeply suspicious fungal problems. You wipe your hands on a cloth. It crumbles slightly. Just another day. Your medicine cabinet is frankly a nightmare. Not the clean, labeled, sweet-smelling type a modern apothecary might proudly display. No, yours is a rickety wooden shelf, teetering beside the hearth, stuffed with pouches, jars, bundles, bones, and the occasional curious spider who refuses to move out despite multiple polite requests. There's dried foxglove wrapped in a scrap of linen. A jar of honey infused with rose hips that now doubles as glue. 3 withered leeches in a cup you swear used to be clean. And on the top shelf, a collection of powders so unlabeled even you wouldn't dare guess what they are without flipping a coin and whispering a prayer. You reach for your beetle paste, a reliable if disturbing option for warts and spiritual unease. It smells like regret and roasted cabbage. But hey, it works. Or at least people stop complaining after you smear it on. Mainstream historical fact: medieval healers didn't have access to standardized medicine. Their treatments came from folk knowledge, herbal lore, trial and error, and a firm belief in whatever the last person claimed worked. Ingredients included animal fats, herbs, minerals, and occasionally things that make modern stomachs churn, like dried frog skin or powdered mummy. Fringe tidbit: some healers used powdered toad as a fever cure made by baking a toad to a crisp and grinding it into a fine ash. Whether this worked or merely terrified the fever out of people is still a topic of scholarly amusement. You open another drawer. Inside, a crow's foot, a dried apple slice with a bite out of it, and 3 owl feathers tied with twine. You honestly don't remember why they're there, but the baker's son stopped stuttering after you waved the bundle near his head, so you keep it around. A knock at your door. It's the miller's wife. She's holding her husband's arm like a bouquet of disappointment. His elbow is swollen, bruised, and very much the wrong color. You raise an eyebrow. He punched a cartwheel, she explains. Was the cartwheel provoking him? She doesn't answer. You seat him near the hearth and poke gently at the limb. He winces. You frown. This one's going to take more than beetle paste. You grab a rag soaked in vinegar and thyme, apply it, then start grinding willow bark with a stone. It takes 15 minutes and a small personal meltdown to get the right texture. You smear it on and wrap the arm with an old linen sleeve torn from your only spare shirt. Worth it, if it works. They leave behind half a chicken, and a warning that the vicar is asking questions again. Something about unnatural remedies. Of course he is. Historians still argue whether church leaders supported or opposed village healers. Officially, only clergy and approved monks were supposed to treat the sick. But unofficially, they got sick too. And when they did guess who they came to at midnight with their robes pulled low and their dignity in a pouch, you place the willow bark back on the shelf and grab your sleeping blend, lavender valerian root, and a splash of mead. You'll need it later when someone shows up at 3 a.m, moaning about demons in their knees. You tidy your cabinet as best you can. One jar breaks. You mutter something unholy and pretend the cat didn't hear you. Then you add a new item, a small rock that a child swore cured his cousin's hiccups. It probably didn't, but it's smooth, warm, and slightly shiny, good enough for your purposes. Your hands are stained green from crushing herbs. Your apron has things growing on it that weren't there yesterday. Your hair smells like smoked rosemary. You rub your neck, which crunches ominously. No one thanks you. No one sings your name. But they all come knocking when their ears buzz, their feet swell, or their goats refuse to blink. You take a deep breath of chamomile and ashes. You're the healer. You work with what you have. And what you have is beetle paste. You've never attended a university. You've never even seen one. And if you told anyone you were a doctor, you'd probably be laughed out of the village right after someone asked if you could fix their pig's cough. Because here's the secret everyone knows, but no one says you're not officially anything. You have no license, no certificate, no glowing endorsement from the local abbey. Just a handful of plants, a memory full of old wives' tales, and the uncanny ability to identify a fever from across the room by the color of someone's ears. Mainstream historical fact. The vast majority of medieval healers were self-taught or trained informally through apprenticeships, often within their own family or village. Most had no written texts, many couldn't read, and relied entirely on oral tradition, observation, and frankly, trial and error. Fringe tidbit. In some places, healers would mark their tools with sacred symbols, not for function, but to convince others they knew what they were doing. A good spiral or 3-pointed star carved on your mortar could make your mashed beetles seem almost professional. You look around your workspace. It's rustic. The table wobbles unless you stand on one leg while using it. The cauldron is balanced on 3 bricks and a wish. Your tools include 1 dull knife, a wooden spoon, and a length of twine you use for everything from bandaging legs to fending off overly curious goats. Someone once asked if you apprenticed under a real physician. You told them the truth. Your teacher was your aunt, who knew how to make fire cider and how to wrestle a fever into submission using only mustard seeds and shouting. They never asked again. You hear shouting outside. A familiar voice. Old Marcy. She's back. You open the door to find her waving a blistered finger in your face. That salve you gave my cousin made his leg tingle. She barks. You blink. Was it a good tingle? He said. It burned like the devil's bathwater. You nod. That's how you know it's working. Historians still argue whether medieval healers were respected community members or tolerated nuisances. You know the answer. It depends on the day and whether your salve stings or stinks. You assure Marcy that the tingling is normal. She leaves muttering, but not before pocketing a sprig of lavender from your window ledge. For luck, she says. More likely for gossip. You sit down, pour yourself a mug of weak cider, and sigh. Deeply, the kind of sigh that rattles your bones and makes the cat glance at you like you've said something impolite. You know what they call you behind your back, hedge witch, herb bone, root pusher. You've even heard swamp sage, which, while not flattering, at least sounds majestic. And yet, when their children are burning with fever, when the cow won't eat, when someone wakes up with boils the size of acorns, they come running. Because you're all they have. You remember the priest's sermon last week, where he warned the village about the dangers of trusting false healers. He never said your name. He didn't need to. The whole congregation glanced sideways at you, sitting in the back, smelling faintly of vinegar and despair. Still, 2 nights later, his sister showed up at your door with a cough and a prayer. You treated her. Of course you did, because you're not in it for thanks. You're in it because no one else will do it, because someone has to know which roots to boil and which mushrooms to avoid. Someone has to answer the door when the midwife is drunk and the baby's coming early. Someone has to sit by the fire at 2 a.m., crushing willow bark for a man who thinks bees live in his ears. That someone is you. You run your fingers over the rough wood of your table. You feel the cracks and grooves worn by years of grinding, chopping, preparing, hoping. You're not official, but you're still the first one they call. You're tying up a poultice with bits of linen that used to be a shirt when the screaming starts. Not the fun kind, the kind that means someone's bleeding or about to. You barely have time to throw your herbs into a pouch before the door bursts open and a teenager stumbles in carrying his brother over one shoulder. Like a sack of potatoes that occasionally moans, he dumps the poor lad onto your table, knocking over a jar of dried mint, and gasps. He fell off the roof. Again. Of course he did. You move fast. Feel the boy's pulse still there. His leg bent the wrong way. His nose also the wrong way. His forehead swelling like bread left too close to the hearth. You get to work. Boil water. Grind comfrey root. Bind the leg with splints made from an old fence post. And half a broom handle. You hum something tuneless while you work. It calms your hands. But in the back of your mind, the tension tightens like a knot, because this might not go well. And if it doesn't, you're to blame. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval times, if a patient died under your care, especially a young one, you didn't just lose sleep. You risked losing your reputation, your home, even your life. Healers could be accused of negligence, fraud, or worse, witchcraft. The teen watches you work with wide eyes. Is he going to be okay? He whispers. You pause. You look at the twisted leg, the blood, the bruises blooming like violets in winter. You say, maybe. It's the most honest answer you can give. Fringe tidbit. Some healers carried hollow bones filled with herbs and ash, not for use, but to look wise. Appearances could save your skin when your salve didn't. You finish bandaging, say a prayer, not to anyone in particular, and send the boy home with strict instructions. No climbing, no running, no poking it to see if it still hurts. He nods solemnly. You sit back down, shoulders aching. You've been awake for 16 hours. You haven't eaten since the pickled onion at dawn. Your tea's cold. The cat is asleep on your clean bandages, naturally. And then someone knocks. Again. You drag yourself to the door. It's the butcher's wife. She looks furious. Your tonic gave me stomach cramps, she snaps. You blink. How many drops did you take? All of it. You take a deep breath through your nose, which smells of nettle and stress. It's a tincture, not soup. She huffs and storms off. You can already hear the whispers that'll follow. The healer's cures are poison, they'll say. She uses old roots and devil dust. Historians still argue whether this distrust was rooted in religion, fear, or just the human need to blame someone. But you know the truth. When someone's sick, you're a saint. When they don't get better fast enough, you're a curse. You check the leg boy again before sunset. He's asleep. His breathing is shallow but steady. You dab his forehead with vinegar and whisper a little rhyme your aunt taught you. Not magical, but comforting. You light a candle as the village goes quiet outside, and you think about all the others. The child you couldn't save, the old man who died in your arms, the fever that stole 3 in 1 week. You remember their names, their faces, their last breaths. You also remember the ones who walked out of your hut laughing. But those aren't the ones who haunt you. You stare at the candle. Wax pools, flame flickers. You're not a miracle worker, but they expect you to be. And when you fail, they look at you like you've stolen something from them. Like death is your fault, your failure, your secret crime. You rest your head on the table next to the broken mint jar. You whisper, "Please let him live." You don't know who you're talking to. Maybe yourself, maybe the herbs, maybe whoever's listening. Because you're the healer. And every life you touch might burn you. There's a lull just after sunset when the village falls into uneasy stillness. Chickens roost, fires crackle, drunks begin to slur. For a brief moment, you let yourself believe that maybe, just maybe, you'll get to sleep tonight. Then the bell tolls. Not the church bell, the other one, the one the gravedigger rings. You freeze, because the plague is back again. Mainstream historical fact: plague outbreaks in medieval Europe weren't one-time tragedies. They came in waves, years apart. Sometimes seasons apart. A village might barely recover from one before another rolled in meaner, faster, and more mysterious than the last. You grab your mask, not the fancy kind with a beak and herbs stuffed in the nose like the city doctors had. Yours is a damp cloth tied around your face and a sprig of rosemary tucked behind your ear. It's mostly psychological, but in times like these, everything is. Outside, people are already panicking. A boy lies in the road, shivering. A woman vomits into her apron. The priest is holding a cross like it's a sword. You kneel beside the boy. He's hot. His armpits are swollen. His breath rattles. You know these signs. You've seen them before. You try not to think about the time your aunt caught it. You try not to remember how she screamed. You send the boy's family away. You wrap him in blankets, dab his forehead, and mix what little yarrow you have left with water. Not to cure, to comfort. Fringe. Tidbit. Some healers believed a specific mixture of rosewater and crushed emeralds could ward off plague. Unfortunately, crushed emeralds were in short supply for obvious reasons. You once tried dyed gravel. No one was impressed. Back in your hut, you start plague prep. You burn dried juniper on the fire, not because it works, but because it smells clean. You cover cracks in the wall with damp cloth. You hang garlic and dried hyssop. The cat sneezes and leaves. Coward. The village sends more. A girl with blotches. A man coughing blood. A baby with a rash. You pray is just heat, but you know better. You isolate them in the granary. You mix herbs. You ration vinegar. You tell them stories while they shake with fever. The baker dies first. No time for a funeral. You're too busy trying to keep his wife alive. Then she goes too. You sit in the dirt outside your hut, hands covered in ash and mint oil, and stare at nothing. You wonder if you're next. Historians still argue whether healers had higher survival rates during plague waves. Some say, yes, experience helped. Others say, no, they were simply the first exposed. You wash your hands in wine. You drink the rest. You curse softly. You cry harder. By day 3, you've set up a makeshift hospital in the empty stable. The goat's not thrilled, but you promise him it's temporary. You hang cloth between the stalls. You use the good salve. You hum lullabies. You lose 3 more. You don't even know their names. By day 5, it slows. Whether the wind shifted, the rain came, or your desperate garlic charms actually worked, you'll never know. You bury the bodies. You dig with your hands. No one helps. Too afraid. Too ashamed. Too alive. When it's over, the village crawls back into motion, like a stunned animal. You clean your hut, burn your linens, throw out half your herbs. You stare into your empty medicine chest and feel the quietness inside your bones. You lived. You're still here. But part of you isn't. Because every time the plague comes back, it takes something that doesn't grow back: your certainty, your smile, your ability to believe in a future that doesn't reek of vinegar and smoke. You look down at your hands. They shake now, not from fear, from remembering, because you're the healer, and you know the plague will return. It always does. The chickens are back in your garden, and you don't even chase them off. Let them eat the fennel. It's not like the villagers are paying you in anything useful this week anyway. You open your pouch and count the week's earnings. 2 eggs, cracked a half-carved spoon, 1 turnip that has clearly seen war, and a blessing from a woman whose goat you treated for emotional upset. You are officially poor as dirt. And even that dirt might have more savings than you. Mainstream historical fact. Most medieval village healers, especially women, earned little to no actual money. Services were exchanged for goods, promises, prayers, or the occasional, suspiciously soft loaf of bread. They were considered essential, but only when things went wrong. Otherwise, back to being that strange one with the jars. You tuck the turnip into the corner where the cat's been nesting lately. He gives you a look of deep judgment and relocates to your blanket, which smells faintly of boiled leeks and burned rosemary. You sit down and examine the spoon. It's technically a weapon, or art. Either way, it won't fix the hole in your roof. You once tried charging real coin for your work. That lasted until the Reeves' cousin offered you half a button and a broken rake in response, then told the village you'd grown greedy. You still have the rake. Fringe. Tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, healers were occasionally paid in song. Not poetic romantic song, more like my cousin's. Back doesn't hurt anymore. Thank you. Kindly sung off-key at the local tavern. You'd prefer turnips. You fix a meal from your dwindling stores. Some stale bread, soaked in broth, a few foraged greens, and what may or may not be a radish. The cat stares offended that you didn't share. You remind him he doesn't pay rent. Then comes a knock. Again, it's the cooper. He's holding his arm like it's about to fall off. What happened, you ask? He grins sheepishly. Barrel fight. You pause. You fought. A barrel. He shrugs. It won. You wave him in. You smear his wound with a mix of honey and garlic, then bind it in a strip torn from your old apron. You're now down to half an apron and a full sense of resignation. He asks what he owes you. You say, "Do you have any candles?" He gives you a smile that's 40% apology and 60% indigestion. No, but I've got a dried fish. You don't blink. Done. He leaves the fish on your table. You nod solemnly, as if it's a bar of gold. It smells like sadness. You'll eat it tomorrow. Historians still argue whether healers lived in poverty out of necessity or out of the spiritual nobility of service. You'd like to argue back, loudly. With your empty pantry, you consider starting a price list. Cough, 2 onions. Broken limb, 1 goat. Exorcism, cash only. But you know how that would go. The villagers would complain. Someone would say you'd lost your calling, as if this life is a calling, not something you survived your way into. You stare at the fish, then at your roof. It leaks when the wind sighs too hard. You patch it with straw and muttered curses. You spend the evening drying herbs, binding them into little bundles, and labeling them with charcoal scribbles only you can read. You hum as you work. It keeps the silence away. You glance at the spoon again. It's ugly. You love it a little. You're poor. But when the fever returns, when the baby won't breathe, when the harvest sours, and the dreams get strange, they won't go to the Lord. They won't go to the priest. They'll come to you, because you're the healer. And even if you have nothing, you're still all they've got. You're hanging bundles of dried mugwort above your door. When you hear it, the heavy clomp of boots you recognize instantly. It's the priest, and he's not here for tea. You quickly brush dirt off your apron. Pointless move, a suspiciously horned root behind a curtain too late, and try to smile like someone who absolutely did not just finish brewing a remedy called St. Bridget's Gentle Purge. He doesn't smile back. The villagers tell me you've been using charms. Ah, that old chestnut, mainstream historical fact in many medieval communities, especially after the rise of church authority in rural areas. Healers who used herbs, charms, or anything considered outside divine healing were accused of sorcery, heresy, or dancing too close to the devil's herbs. Even common plants, like sage or rosemary, could be viewed with suspicion if used the wrong way. You gesture toward your work table, where unfortunately a bundle of rue is still smoking gently beside a carved talisman shaped like a toad. It's just for colic, you say. The baby's fine now. He squints at you, then at the cat, who has draped himself across a bowl of bones and looks very smug. The church does not support witchcraft, the priest mutters, as if this is news. You nod solemnly. Neither do I. That's why I boil everything. He doesn't laugh. You offer him a tea of nettle and mint. No charms, no whispers, just plants. He declines, stares around your hut like he's expecting the walls to start chanting. Fringe. Tidbit. Some healers actually partnered with local clergy to avoid suspicion. Others were excommunicated, or worse, especially when their remedies worked better than a priest's prayers. You try to keep your reputation somewhere in the sweet spot between useful enough not to burn and mysterious enough not to cross. The priest eventually leaves, but not before warning you to stay within God's light. You nod, trying not to smile at the irony, considering your only light source is a smoky tallow candle shaped like a saint's toe. Outside, it starts to rain. You duck inside and sigh. Your herbs will be damp again. Your floor, already spongy, will return to its natural state, moss adjacent. And then you hear it, another knock. You groan, loudly. But it's not a villager this time. It's a stranger, a man with a wide hat, a deep cough, and coins. Actual coins. You blink. He wants a tonic, something for the lungs. He places silver on your table like it's normal. You almost cry. You nod, mix up a blend of licorice root horehound and wild honey. You even throw in a few blessed violet petals. He thanks you softly and disappears back into the mist. You stare at the coins, real gleaming silver. You could buy a new roof tile, maybe even a loaf of fresh bread. You clutch them to your chest like a relic. Historians still argue whether healers were respected more for their skills or feared for their independence. The answer is simple. It depends who's dying. When the bishop is sick, you're a saint. When his cousin recovers and says he only drank holy water, you're a suspect. You stash the coins under your mattress. You whisper a thank you to no one in particular. You sit down and sip your own medicine, bitter, warm, comforting. The candle flickers. The rain hums. The cat purrs briefly, then coughs up something on your best rag. Of course, you wrap up your work for the night. You label the new herbs, grind one last batch of pain powder, and stoke the fire. The priest might not approve of your salves, your rituals, or your rosemary charms. But when he wakes up, wheezing in the middle of the night, you know exactly where he'll go, because you're the healer, and your heresy heals. The rooster hasn't even thought about crowing yet, and someone is already banging on your door like they're trying to beat it into herbal compliance. You groan, pull your cloak tighter, and shuffle to open it, expecting a boil or a busted knee. Nope. It's Marta, and she's sobbing. Oh, no, you whisper, not because you're heartless, but because you know what this means. Someone needs comfort, not a salve, not a tea, a miracle. Marta collapses onto your rickety bench, wailing about her husband. Not dead, not dying, just moody. She's convinced he's possessed, or cursed, or both. You gently pry apart her story word by trembling word. Turns out, he's been distant since the harvest, sleeping too much, snapping at the goats, saying he feels hollow. You sigh. He's not cursed. He's just sad. Which means you're now the village therapist. Mainstream historical fact. In the absence of formal psychological understanding, medieval healers were often the first and only line of emotional care. You weren't just the herbalist. You were the confidant, the whisper catcher, the one who listened when others rolled their eyes. You brew her a calming blend, valerian mint, a hint of apple peel for sweetness, and hand her a cloth to wipe her tears. Then you give her some dried lavender and a charm etched with a spiral. Put this under his pillow, you say. Tell him it's from the stars. Will it fix everything? Of course not. But it gives her something to believe in. And belief out here is often stronger than anything you have in a jar. Fringe tidbit. Some healers crafted dream tokens, little bundles of herbs and symbols wrapped in cloth to ward off nightmares or bad moods. People believed these held power. Maybe they did. Maybe they just helped people sleep better. Later that day, a farmer comes in, not with an illness, but a confession. He swears the corn won't grow because he insulted the moon. You nod solemnly, as if this makes perfect sense. You scribble something in charcoal on a twig and hand it to him. Apologize with this, you say. Also, try watering more. He leaves cradling the twig like a relic. You never said you weren't part con artist. But it's not deceit. Not really. It's faith, shaped into something people can hold. Then the midwife knocks. She's 2 mugs deep into mead and swaying like a willow. You busy, she slurs. You eye her. Should I be? There's a birth, she says. Breach. Of course there is. You grab your birthing kit, warm towels, sage oil, a clean cloth with the least number of holes, and your knife, the sharp one. You hurry to the cottage, where the screams are already audible. Inside panic. The mother's young, terrified. The father is pale and shaking. You push everyone aside, wash your hands in hot water, and get to work. You guide the baby gently, whispering old rhymes, prayers, fragments of lullabies your aunt used to chant when the storms got bad. The baby arrives, red and squalling. A girl. The mother sobs. You wrap the child and hand her over your own hands, still trembling. No one notices. You clean up, pack your things, and slip out quietly. The midwife will take the credit. That's fine. You're not here for glory. You're here because someone has to be. Historians still argue whether healers served as midwives because of skill or necessity. The answer, yes, both. You deliver babies, mend minds, listen to rants, and interpret dreams, because if you don't, who will? Back at your hut, the cat has thrown up again. On your good shawl. Naturally. You sit down, open your journal, a stack of bark-bound scraps, and write, "Girl born. Moon nearly full." Marta cried again. Prescribed mint and lies. The candle flickers. You look at your hands, still stained, still steady, because you're the healer. And sometimes the best medicine is listening. You sleep for maybe an hour, maybe. It's hard to tell anymore because someone is always sick, or cursed, or vomiting dramatically beside your turnip patch while their relatives wail like banshees at your door. This time, it's Edgar. Again, the man has had a headache every full moon for the past decade and is firmly convinced it's the work of invisible woodland spirits with a grudge. You offer him your spirit tonic, which between you and your cat is just rosemary, elderflower, and vinegar soaked in moonlight. He drinks it and burps thunderously, then announces he's cured. Good. Because right behind him is Lila, who's either pregnant, poisoned, or both, and she's not in the mood to explain which. Mainstream historical fact: healers in medieval villages were on call 24/7. There were no appointments, no opening hours, and certainly no privacy. People barged into your home with bleeding hands, swollen knees, or convulsing livestock at all hours of the day and night. You take one look at Lila and usher her in. Her face is pale, her pulse thready, and she's sweating buckets. You sit her down, check her eyes, and ask what she ate. She shrugs. The pie. You close your eyes. What pie? The green one from Marcy. Ah, Marcy's pies again. You're 70% sure she's trying to poison the entire village with undercooked hedge apples and suspiciously eager mushrooms. You hand Lila a bucket. Fringe tidbit. In some communities, healers were expected to taste test suspicious foods to determine if someone had been cursed or simply made terrible life choices. You've pretended to do this once or twice. A dramatic sniff, a thoughtful pause, and a lot of internal praying after Lila stumbles home, pale but upright. You barely sit before a boy runs in, screaming about a cow foaming at both ends. You grab your bag, mutter a few words your aunt would definitely disapprove of, and follow him to the barn. The cow is indeed foaming. You check its eyes. Off. Its breath. Worse. You mix up a quick poultice of activated charcoal and mash it into its feed, all while dodging a frantic chicken and the boy's hysterical grandmother. They thank you by giving you a single sock. You don't ask. You return to your hut and finally sit down just in time for the blacksmith's apprentice to arrive, clutching his bleeding hand and looking sheepish. I touched the glowing part, he mutters. You stare. Of the iron. He nods. You stare harder. You don't say anything. You just start wrapping it. Historians still argue whether healers ever got rest or regular sleep. The likely answer is absolutely not, especially not when the entire village thought anything from nightmares to stomach aches to hiccups required urgent herbal attention. You try to keep a schedule. Morning poultices, midday tonics, evening tea, blending, and then ideally a bit of writing or candle watching. But instead, you're spooning elder syrup into a man who swears he's been cursed by a goose. You wash your hands again in rainwater mixed with crushed mint and lemon balm. The mint is gone now. The balm is nearly out. You make a note to forage tomorrow. If you survive the night, your bed calls to you. So does your broom and your teacup and the nearly empty jar labeled for when everything hurts. You lie down for 12 whole seconds. Then someone screaming again. You grab your bag. You grab your cloak. You grab your cat, who wriggles free immediately and goes back to judging you from the firewood pile. And out you go, because you're the healer. And if you're lucky, you'll sleep next week. You crouch in the corner of old Bran's cottage, holding a sprig of nettle in one hand and a bowl of goat's milk in the other, staring into the eyes of a man who insists the walls are whispering. To be fair, they might be. His fever is high enough that the table just told him it forgives him for the turnip incident, and you don't even ask what that means. You just soak a cloth, press it to his forehead, and mutter a calming charm your aunt once used on a neighbor who tried to marry a bush, because some days you're treating things you don't understand, and no one else even tries. Mainstream historical fact: medieval village healers faced a terrifying range of afflictions with no microscopes, no understanding of viruses, and no maps of the human body. They encountered dancing sickness, spontaneous swellings, phantom pain, and the occasional man who claimed to have been hexed by a rooster. You're pretty sure Bran doesn't have the plague, but he's twitching, muttering in 3 languages, and won't let go of your wrist. So you tie a charm around his bedpost, hang some yarrow in the rafters, and dose him with wine boiled with herbs until he finally sleeps. Then you sit exhausted and listen to the wind rattle the shutters. You don't understand what's happening, but you stayed. Fringe tidbit. Some medieval healers believed in wandering womb syndrome, where the uterus traveled around the body, causing all sorts of madness. This idea was used to explain nearly everything from migraines to spiritual crises. You personally chalk it up to bad cabbage and worse husbands. You move on to your next patient, a girl whose arm is making a noise. You blink at it. It does, in fact, crackle when she moves it. You press flex stretch, and it pops. Her mother faints. You revive her with a vinegar rag, offer the girl a dried plum, and remind everyone not to swing from rafters, pretending to be the village owl again. Next, a man with hives all over his chest and a very guilty look in his eye. You ask what he touched. He says, "A mushroom." You ask, "Which mushroom?" He shrugs and says, "It looked sad." You whisper a short prayer to whatever deity governs forest stupidity and give him a strong decoction of mint oat water and sheer disappointment. Historians still argue whether medieval healers relied more on logic tradition or pure luck. You know the truth, mostly guesswork, but it's guesswork backed by herbs, intuition, and an unsettling number of successful recoveries. You treat a farmer with a dancing leg, probably nerve damage, definitely dramatic. You splint it with willow bark and tell him to rest. He says, "But how will I stomp the grain?" You say, gently. He doesn't laugh. You collapse back in your hut, near dusk, covered in nettle, stings, smelling of sweat and parsley, when someone knocks again. Of course, this time it's the merchant passing through. He smells like horses' spices and plague-free wealth. "My wife's heart hurts," he says. You pause. "What kind of hurt?" she cries. "Every day." You nod. You brew a tea. You write down a charm. You add a sachet of rose chamomile and sage. You explain how to use it. He listens, wide-eyed, like it's magic. And maybe it is. Because tomorrow she might smile again. Or not. But at least she'll know someone tried. That night, you lie down and stare at the rafters. You think of Bran, the mushroom man, the girl with the owl injury. You think of all the things they bring you, not just wounds and fevers, but fear, grief, loneliness. Things you can't treat with beetle paste, but you try anyway, because you're the healer. And even when you don't understand the sickness, you still answer the knock. You're halfway through grinding mustard seeds into a paste when you pause and sniff the air. Yep, that's you. You smell like medicine, and not in the romantic apothecary with a tiny glass, vial kind of way. No, you smell like a blend of dried urine, sour herbs, burnt wool, and anxiety. You wipe your hands on your apron again, and only make it worse. The villagers have stopped pretending not to notice. They wrinkle their noses when you walk by. Children whisper that you must sleep on a bed of nettles. You do not. but you did once accidentally nap on a pile of wild garlic. That memory lives in your sinuses. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval healers used a range of odorous substances. Animal fats, fermented plant matter, pungent roots, even bodily fluids. Sanitation, as we now understand it, was non-existent. A healer's hut was a full sensory experience, and not a pleasant one. You glance at your hands, permanently stained green. One thumbnail has a bit of something dried under it, possibly sage, possibly something from the cow birth last week. You try not to think about it. You dunk your hands into a bucket of rainwater, scented faintly with vinegar. It helps, barely. Fringe. Tidbit. In some regions, healers bathed in herbal smoke, waving burning rosemary or lavender bundles over their heads instead of water. You've tried it. Your cat attacked the bundle. You've never forgiven him. You try your best. You hang bundles of mint near the door. You rub your wrists with lemon balm. You even stuffed your boots with dried chamomile once. That was a mistake. Warm feet. Sticky regrets. But what choice do you have? You sweat through every cure. You haul patience. You press hot poultices against festering wounds. You stand in smoky corners for hours, inhaling every ailment they exhale back at you. Someone once asked if you ever worried about catching all the illnesses you treat. You smiled and said, "Only the airborne ones." They didn't laugh. Historians still argue whether healers were considered unclean or blessedly protected. The truth, you were both, revered and avoided, needed and feared. You were the village's holy paradox, wrapped in nettles and goat fur. You rub your face and flinch at the texture of dried lavender and something that might be mint paste. A knock. Because of course. You open the door to find the brewer's apprentice, eyes red and leaking from some mystery puffiness. You squint. Allergy infection. Emotional turmoil. He says, "My eyes are itchy." You nod. Take off your hat. He does. Ah. You pull a large beetle from his hair. It blinks. You toss it into the herbs. Better. He nods, stunned. You make him a rinse with eyebright and golden seal, and send him home, instructing him not to nap in haystacks ever again. You also give him a sachet to hang near his bed. He sniffs it, then gags. Why does it smell like old socks? You reply, "That's the healing." You return to your hut, where the smell of sage oil mixes with damp boots and faint despair. You collapse into your chair and look around bundles of drying herbs, bottles of mysterious liquid bowls of questionable paste, and the ever-present fog of you. You think for just a second about a bath, a real one. Warm water, fresh soap, maybe even a ribbon for your hair. Then you remember your bucket, the dented cauldron, and the frog that's taken up residence near your wash basin, maybe tomorrow. Tonight, you toss another handful of thyme into the fire, and the smoke curls up, and for one perfect moment, you smell like something almost lovely, because you're the healer. And this is the perfume of your purpose. It starts with a whisper. Always does. This time, it's from the butcher's niece, murmured behind a hand that smells faintly of lard and envy. She cured my sister's fever too fast. That's not normal. You freeze halfway through crushing a fennel seed because you know that tone. It's not awe. It's not gratitude. It's fear wearing curiosity's face. You keep your head down, but your ears stay open. By sundown, 3 people have accidentally crossed themselves when you walk by. By morning, someone scrawled a crooked symbol in ash on your door. And just like that, it begins. One bad rumor equals firewood, mainstream historical fact in medieval Europe. Healers, especially women, often walked a fine line between valued wisdom and dangerous heresy. It took very little, a failed cure, a jealous neighbor, a sick child, for someone to whisper the word witch. You wipe off the ash calmly. But inside, your stomach knots like an angry vine. You know the signs. It starts with glances, then silence, then someone's goat dies, and suddenly you killed it. You've seen it happen. You've helped bury the last healer this happened to. You double-check your herbs. Nothing suspicious. You hide the toad skull just in case. You stop burning the sweet grass, even though it helps with coughs. You remove the carved spiral from your door frame. Fringe. Tidbit. In some villages, charms once handed out to protect infants were later used as evidence of sorcery. It was a short fall from "thank you for saving my baby" to "she hexed my horse." You tighten your cloak and keep to the shadows. You speak softly. You smile just a bit too much. You avoid the priest entirely. Then Marta shows up, sobbing. Her youngest is fevered, badly, pale, shaking. She doesn't knock, just runs in, breathless. Please, please. And despite everything, the whispers, the looks, the creeping dread in your bones, you go to her child. You crush herbs, boil roots, cool the fever. Sing the old song you only use for little ones. And when he opens his eyes and sighs, you nearly cry with relief. She hugs you. She thanks you. She leaves. And then the whispers stop. Not entirely, but enough. Someone says, she saved Marta's boy. Someone else says, maybe she's strange, but she works. You hang the spiral back on the door. You burn the sweet grass again. You even polish your ladle. Historians still argue whether healers survived accusations through skill, strategy, or sheer luck. You know the answer. Yes, all of it. And silence. So much silence. You're careful for weeks. You speak gently. You mix only the simplest remedies. You smile more. You laugh once by accident, and it felt dangerous. But slowly, the weight lifts. The priest nods at you from a distance. A child leaves you a flower on your step. The baker gives you bread. No one says the word witch, but they almost say thank you. You stir your tea and breathe in the scent of honey and thyme. You survived the whisper. For now, because you're the healer. And all it takes is one bad harvest, one failed cure, one scream in the night, and you're kindling. The cow gave birth sideways. The cooper's daughter sprained her ankle dancing with a goat. And someone left a sack of dead eels on your doorstep as payment for an ointment you never made. You don't even bother to ask anymore. You just bury the eels and go back to stirring your anti-swelling paste, which currently smells like mustard regret and swamp. And as you scrape the bowl clean with your fingernail, you realize something. No one thanked you today. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval villages, healers were often taken for granted. Their services were expected, not celebrated. They were the background hum of survival, only truly noticed when they failed. You don't demand gratitude. That would be unbecoming, unwise even. But still you remember the moments when you stopped a man's bleeding with your own shirt, when you sat beside a feverish child for 3 nights and gave her parents your last bit of honey, when you carried a dying sheep 2 miles because no one else would help. Not one thank you. Fringe tidbit. Some healers believed that true service should be silent and anonymous. Others kept tokens, a bead, a feather, a braid of grass, as symbols of people they'd helped. You keep a pouch under your bed. Inside it, a baby's ribbon, a carved spoon, a pebble from the river where you once saved a drowning boy. You carry that pouch like armor, because when they forget your kindness, you can remind yourself, even if no one else does. You step outside. The air is heavy with the scent of wet wool and the distant tang of manure. Someone is arguing about chickens again. You sigh. A child runs up, shouting about her grandmother's melting knees. You don't ask. You just follow. You brew tea. You bandage feet. You mash roots. You nod while someone tells you about their cousin's nightmares of a singing potato. And when the day ends, you sit by the fire alone and whisper the names of the ones you helped this week, like a prayer, like a ledger, like proof that you were here. The cat crawls into your lap and purrs, smelling faintly of dried marjoram and mischief. He's the only one who thanks you, and he does it by kneading your leg and shedding on your cloak. You light a candle, you hum an old tune, you clean your tools, because even without praise, even without notice, you show up, you work, you heal, not because they thank you, but because they still come. Because they still believe somewhere inside that when pain comes knocking, you'll answer. Because you're the healer. And thankless or not, this is who you are. The frost has settled like breath on the earth, turning fields silver and your toes to wood. You wake with your cloak wrapped around your shoulders and a stubborn headache that tastes like smoke and crushed rosemary. There's no knock today, no shout, no goat in distress, just silence. And for a moment, it's worse than noise, because if no one's coming, no one's living. And that for a healer is the loneliest kind of peace. You sip your tea slowly. The last of your dried mint swims at the top like tiny green ghosts. You chew it out of habit. It reminds you you're still human, still hungry, still here. Mainstream historical fact, even at the height of fear and famine, communities clung to their healers. Whether revered, resented, or both, they were the anchor in a world where death arrived in shadows or smoke. You were the constant, the candle against the storm. Outside, the village stirs. Slowly, you hear a cart creak, a dog bark, the first cry of a newborn somewhere across the lane. They didn't come to you for it. That's a good sign. You smile, fringe, tidbit. Some healers kept personal journals, recording not only recipes and remedies, but the names of the people they saved, the ones they lost, and the things they'd never tell another soul. You've written every day. The ink is made from oak gall and iron. The pages smell like honesty. You open the book now and write, "No visitors today. First frost. I'm still breathing." The fire crackles. The cat, older now, hops onto the windowsill and watches the world without judgment. You envy that. You stand, stretch, wince. Your knees don't approve of this weather. You grind a bit of willow bark and mix it with honey. It won't fix everything, but it'll take the edge off. You wander your hut, straighten a crooked herb bundle, wipe a smudge from the glass jar of violet oil. Touch each object like a friend. You've lived here for decades. You've watched babies born lovers healed, and elders fade like smoke. And still they come, still they knock, because in a world with more ghosts than bread, more pain than comfort, more questions than answers, you are their thread, the saw that keeps them from unraveling. Even now, as your joints creak and your hands shake when tying off a bandage, you know they'll still come to you. Not because you're perfect, not because you're holy, but because when death knocks, you knock back. And even if they don't say it, even if they never will, you are the reason their world doesn't fall apart, because you are the healer. And in this weary, wild, beautiful mess of a village, you are hope with a pulse. The fire dims now, casting long, quiet shadows across the floor. You wrap your cloak tighter and sit by the hearth, letting the warmth soak into your bones what's left of it. The night hums outside, soft and distant. A chill wind brushes the edges of your hut, whispering through cracks, tugging at the herbs hanging in the rafters. The cat is asleep, curled like a comma in your story. The candle flickers as if listening. You close your eyes and listen to the silence, not empty, but earned. You think of the names, the faces, the hands you've held, the ones who lived, the ones who didn't. Each one etched into the lines of your palms like forgotten prayers. The world doesn't remember you. It never will. But you remember. And that's enough. You breathe in time and ash, and out goes the weight of another day, lighter, slower. Tomorrow, there will be another cough, another fever, another wound wrapped in panic and hope. And you'll be there, because even after all this time, you're still the healer. And now, dear listener, so are you. So rest your eyes, let the night hold you gently, and dream of soft earth, warm hands, and the quiet courage of those who mend the world one soul at a time.